I'm Caitlin Cadieux, an animator and illustrator.
And I'm Ira Marks. I write and draw comics. And this is a podcast about the mysterious and magical process of bringing cartoon stories to life.
That's true. And if you're enjoying it, where can we be reached, Ira?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so like right up top, you can find our episode archive and all these things at Cartoon Feelings. If you're a fan of the show and you've been enjoying it, we've got a little Patreon where we're starting to put new content. We've talked about The Haunted Mansion. We've talked about A Bug's Life. And we've talked about a book I made.
And more, eventually.
Yeah. And there'll be so much more. And another thing you could do if you really like us is hop on Apple Podcasts and leave a nice little review. And up to 5 stars, possibly only. I think you can only put 5 stars, actually. Yeah, it's the only button that works. And of course, tell your friends.
So today's episode, what
are we doing today?
We're going to see some ghosts, probably. Solve a couple mysteries, maybe. Climb into a mystery machine, perhaps. We're going to talk about Scooby-Doo. And we have a guest.
Oh, we do.
We are wont to do.
Yeah, we're meeting him outside the abandoned carnival. This is just it's where he wanted us to pick him up.
Okay, I was going to say, why did we go here? Why?
This was his request.
This is such a weird place to just be hanging out on a Tuesday night? Yes.
And here he is, Clay Mcleod Chapman.
Hey.
A ghost.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just hanging out, behind this tree. It was I'm glad you guys made it. You found the map.
Oh, that's true.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was kind of obvious, like you put it in the mummy's tomb. I mean, obviously.
And I followed the invisible footprints all the way here to this location.
They were glowing with like phosphorescent seaweed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I always worried about that seaweed. Like we need an environmental report on that body of water.
I guess we'll see.
There's a reason why cancer was prevalent amongst the Mystery Machine crew, but
the lost episode.
Passed away so recently.
Too soon.
Okay, before we go too far down the Great Dane rabbit hole, Clay, you're a horror writer. Horror writer is a tough phrase for me to say, but it's actually 2 words. When I say it, it sounds like 1 word.
The horror writer.
Oh, yeah. Wow, that is good.
I was thinking, what is that? That's Marlon Brando, right? The horror. It doesn't work, right? I'm just like hopping all over the place.
Hey, you're doing great.
Okay, good.
We're keeping all this in and not cutting it. For sure.
Don't. You can't cut it. You can't cut it. Like
it's valuable.
This is
don't cut it.
This is as good as it gets. It's all downhill from here. I was too soon with my Marlon Brando impersonation. Now I have nothing left.
Yeah, you have a whole however long we record to come up with a funny ending joke.
Now, here's what you do have though, Clay. You've got a rich archive of work. You're still alive. Maybe we shouldn't call it an archive till you've passed. Like it's a living body that's growing to this day.
More to come.
Now, this is why I think you're the perfect guest for this.
Yeah.
I'm going to kind of paint this picture about you. If you want to stop me and explain yourself at any point, that's fine.
I am leaning back. I'm waiting for this story.
So you've got some great books out there. They're horror, they're adult horror, but you're diverse in your horror interests and you kind of spread the wealth to other markets. And you've a project that I would love to talk about on a different podcast is your Quiet Part Loud horror podcast series that just came out. So that's really cool. A thing you were doing with
that Mr. Jordan Peele, Mr. Monkey Paw.
Yeah, that's his name. That's a good name.
And, I've heard of him.
Now
he seems cool.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he'll.
He's right. That guy, that Jordan, he's all right. The Mr. Monkey Paw.
He's done some neat stuff.
He's capture the zeitgeist someday. So that we'll set that aside. I'm too excited about that to even get there. Now, you have a film you worked on that came out this year as well. True?
Yeah. Wendell and Wild, I guess we're talking about. Yeah.
Briefly.
Another Monkey Paw joint. Directed by Henry Selick, Mr. Coraline, Mr. Nightmare Before Christmas, James and the Giant Peach. Yeah, it was. I mean, it's beautiful. Voiced by Key and Peele. I mean, you can't get much better than that. Angela Bassett, Ving Rhames. It was pretty amazing.
Can you just before we get into the topic for today a little bit, could you maybe like talk about how the kind of kids horror stuff came into the picture for you?
Your horror journey, please.
my life in horror. I mean, it's funny because I feel like, I don't know. And maybe this kind of dovetails into the Scooby-Doo-ness of it all. But like, I feel like when you are when you're exposed to horror at an early age, there was that babysitter who probably like put on that movie that I was way too young to watch. And I do think it had to be Halloween, but I was also of a particular generation, the Scooby-Doo generation, where like TBS was like a kind of one-stop shop for Saturday afternoon movies. Like you could watch horror movies on on TBS, but it would always be, there were always these like PG rated movies that somehow kind of like slip past the censor. And I'm thinking of films like Tourist Trap, which is an amazing film for those of you who kind of like to imbibe in kind of messed up, spooky movies. But there would be nothing edited out. Like they were safe enough that they could be aired on a Saturday afternoon and slip past, parents. And so like I would watch things like Tourist Trap, Saturday the 14th, Student Bodies, like movies that were not great movies. Like I'm not advocating for Student Bodies as high quality, but like they were amazing for a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old to watch. Like, like they were gateway horror. And, that just kind of led to, being a fan for life. And, I was just chasing that high, for the rest of my childhood into adulthood of just like wanting to like experience that. I don't want to be glib about it, but I do think that it's a kind of particular trauma that comes with watching something that you might not have the kind of emotional maturity to watch yet. And yet you're kind of exposed to Michael Myers, you're exposed to, you name it. And I think that as a kid, seeing those films, it just kind of set me, honestly, it just set me down a path. Like I was scared to death. I suffered from like extreme night terrors from like age like 6 to 9. Like I can vividly remember like just like being kind of landlocked in my bed. And that was childhood for me. And, lo and behold, someone put a pencil in my hand and started saying you should start telling stories or, kind of articulate these traumas, these fears of yours. And it led to, just writing about spooky stuff, like killer snowmen or, monstrous cardboard boxes. And, like it just, that, those are the stories that I wanted to tell. And somehow, fast forward, years and years later, like it leads to this kind of very humble existence, being able to kind of tell these stories for other people and trying to traumatize them.
Yeah. Ooh, well told.
Also very honest. I feel like not many people are honest about the repeating the cycle of trauma for horror stuff.
Yeah, right? Like it's but I don't know, is there pleasurable trauma? Is there like what is the, it's not happy trauma, but what is the the fun trauma? Is that a thing? Like the like sweet trauma?
I think it is. Like, I feel silly saying it because this podcast has not really been about that many scary movies, but
no, not really.
We have often talked about how we were scared of them when we saw them as children, stuff like that. And like, I feel like we talked about that a lot in the Secret of Nim episode.
Oh my God.
Where it is, there's this nostalgia that you have for watching stuff that's way over your head and makes you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't really know why.
It like resonates.
Like,
Yeah, it resonates with something more complicated than you're seeing on the surface, right? Like I feel like that's where the scare comes from.
Is that a generational thing? Like, because I mean, you mentioned I think of The Last Unicorn. I think of The Secret of Nim. I think of, Return to Oz, or, like Labyrinth, or, like there are all these amazing movies that seem to come out at a point where there wasn't a kind of guiding principle to say like, hey, are we really going to show this to kids? Like, is this is this
question
a good idea, guys?
Yeah.
What are the ramifications of showing this? Absolutely.
Well, I think
1982 was the magic year where all this weird stuff came out.
And it's interesting because it, we'll get into this, like some of the notes I have about Scooby-Doo are, the structure of the show comes from the remixing of character roles to lessen the scares. Yeah. So people were thinking of that in the late 60s, at least in the realm of television. But it's funny how certain studios just swept by them until, I guess, PG-13 comes around with Temple of Doom and sort of like sets the tone for like these categories more so. And now it's even microscopic, almost, the way you can break down kid content where like nobody can accidentally see something if you're paying attention, right? So, the cornerstone here of kind of childhood horror resonating with tropes that are available in more adult horror is kind of a Scooby-Doo template, right? Like this show, I think, kind of introduces you to a bunch of types of villains and scare ideas. It's like a beginner's guide, I don't know, to horror tropes, right? So where was, I'm curious because I feel like I was still I would have called myself a fan even when I was like too cool for the show. I always kind of liked it. As an idea, and I supported the format. So where does this sit, like, in your creative youthdom as you were kind of like growing up watching stuff, and what you'd call yourself a cartoon fan of when you were young?
Well, I feel like I need to kind of separate, there are the facts, there's the kind of actual history of the show itself, but then there's the kind of like emotional history to this, to Scooby-Doo. Like I was, kind of doing like a very modest kind of like cursory Wikipedia dive into Scooby-Doo before tonight. And it kind of stunned me that the original Scooby-Doo, Where Are You, only lasted 3 seasons, because in my mind, that thing was, it existed in perpetuity. Like it just like went for years and years and years. And I'm just stunned that there were, there was the 1969-ish to 70-ish to like, there was just like a couple years where the show, before it kind of came back in I think 78, it just stupefies me because I feel like I vividly remember watching that show every day after school, or, whatever kind of syndication that Scooby-Doo had in my mind, in my kind of unfounded, unreliable narrator memory. Like this show was just on heavy rotation. It just played all the damn time. Yeah. But that's not true. It's like, there's just like a couple of episodes. There's like 30, 40.
Yeah, I did a casual napkin math just now, and it looks like there were 41. And I totally was shocked by that too when I saw that, because to me, it's almost like The Simpsons or something, where I'm like, surely there's like 300 episodes of this just like kicking around. And no.
You would imagine the show has been on for decades. And I guess in a way,
the other iterations, there's like 10 or so, but they don't the aesthetic changes. Yeah. Like I think the one we think of is that original like 40-ish episode run, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's not like Hepcat. It's not like, Bart Simpson on the skateboard kind of Scooby yet.
No. There are no skateboards in the early seasons.
I don't have the dates, but I wanted to know what was the first episode where someone said, and if it wasn't for those kids, I would have gotten away with it too. And I wanted to know which episode did Scrappy come into the fold, and I wanted to. When did the Harlem Globetrotters come in? Like when did like they broke, like there was the mold and there was the routine of it all, the cycle of it all, and I felt like that was a formula that was not futzed with for that original kind of go.
Right. They weren't desperate. They weren't desperate to add a thing and to capture the youth culture of the day. Right. Like that first series is a mystery template that follows the "if it weren't for you kids" format. And then, Scrappy becomes part of that. What do they call it in the 80s? It's like the babification of like our iconic IP. It's like, well, how about you like the Muppets? What if babies? Yeah. Right. And like,
I was thinking it was more like
Tiny Toons.
What is, when you have like a sitcom and it's like it's been on for a couple seasons and they're like, oh my God, we need something
freshen it up.
So they introduce a baby. Like Scrappy was the like, hey, I'm the baby. Like the
Scrappy Doo. Just a very, very small bodied version of Scooby.
Yeah, it's for the kids. Okay, I have kind of a timeline of all this, so we can kind of like riff off all these beats because, Clay, when you were listing movies, some of which we'd already done and probably could happily do again, like Rats of Nim, some of these like icons that we all love, obviously. But when you said Scooby-Doo, I was like, oh, we got to do that one because to me, I had actually just finished reading your book, Whisper Down the Lane, which is really good.
You're still talking to me.
Aw, so modest. But that, I love the idea of that, the Satanic Panic era. And, I was really too young to kind of understand it because I was born in 81. All I understood was like Empire Strikes Back for like many years. That's all I knew about the world. But this idea of kind of the culture, people advocating for like what entertainment should be and what things are safe and not safe, and the way that changes media and the way media responds is like infinitely fascinating. It happens every decade or so, or like it just is constantly happening. So I thought that I thought we'd start with this point of late 60s before Scooby-Doo really comes out. We have like an earlier iteration of this idea. This Action for Children's Television is this now defunct group who were really pressuring the TV networks to drop like violent, quote unquote, Saturday morning cartoons, which at the time were like Johnny Quest or in other like kind of action adventure-y things.
Too scary.
So there were these groups that were just like resistant to kids' entertainment at the time. I don't know if you remember any of it's not like they were super violent. They would stick out in your mind, but were you into like earlier 60s cartoons I don't know about you too, Caitlin. Like, have you ever seen some Johnny Quest?
Yeah, I loved Johnny Quest as a kid. I think a lot of these, because just for context, I was born in 1990, so I totally miss the Satanic Panic, but it sounds great. Wish I could have been there. But they reran a lot of this stuff. I assume on like Cartoon Network and elsewhere when I was a kid. So yeah, I even saw like some of these listed are like Space Ghosts.
FYI though, the Satanic Panic is still going on. Like there is there is a pizzeria where they're just sacrificing kids in DC right now. So
you ever heard about this, y'all? Look it up.
It is amazing that not to sidebar, but like the things that we're afraid of in pop culture or in kind of media, like they go through those cycles. And I think I think of those kind of early era Hanna-Barbera shows, and it's kind of stupefying to think of like what Johnny Quest was like. It was just the danger, the kind of like there was like a sense of adventure there, and it was just amazing that like I don't know, like you take kind of Tintin and that idea of like young boy in peril, and that was kind of I don't think you see that as much, like even in the G.I. Joe and the He-Mans of it all, like they've kind of sanitized that sense of peril that I think was there for good old
and the kind of the realistic settings, like the context where with Tintin, a lot of it was kind of like historical in a way, like you could kind of recognize it was very specific locations a lot of the time. And I don't know if that grounded it too much for people or what. It's an interesting way to think about this stuff. So That is to say that the reaction to this kind of action for children's programming, Fred Silverman, who's like the head of CBS at the time, looks at a Saturday morning block. He's like, we're losing some of this stuff. This stuff is losing in popularity. Parents are resistant to it. We need a new flavor, something that's going to appeal in a more general way. And this is the late 60s. So like Archie is massive, right? Archie fans out there, that song Sugar Sugar, the comic Archie.
Never heard of it.
No? Okay.
Nice.
Sugar, sugar.
Oh, you're talking about hit show Riverdale on Netflix.
Sure, yeah, that's what I mean. Again, another thing like these templates of these shows, like they still echo through everything. It's crazy how many things can be Scooby-Doo-esque that aren't actually like Scooby-Doo unless you really kind of look at the DNA of it. But so okay, Fred Silverman is creating this new show. He wants it to kind of resonate with the charm of Archie, this like sort of like this group of teens doing something. And the key here is that it's a band at this point. Like they're very into this idea that there's like this music element, like the Monkees, like the pop music of the time is like, it's just really capturing the teens. And Filmation is doing the Archie show. So Fred goes to William Hanna and Joseph Barbera and he's like, we need to make something in the Archie mold, but it's got to have like its own little twist. And at this time, they've done like the Flintstones. Thumbs up on the Flintstones. Good. Okay.
It's too violent. Too violent and scary.
Another show that's sort of echoing something different. Like it's basically the Honeymooners, right? But for kids. We've got Yogi Bear, we've got Tom and Jerry and all this stuff. And then we get to this idea for Scooby-Doo. And it's not even called Scooby-Doo yet. It's called...
The Mysteries 5. Was that the first name?
Yeah, I think there's even an earlier title that uses the word mystery. And the idea is that it's 5 teens in a band. And in between gigs, I don't know how they have time for this. Or like extra cash, they'd be in a touring band. But they're solving mysteries just out of the goodness of their heart. So that's the original idea.
And it worked. Worked really well.
Which is also... like thinking of the basic premise of we're a band and we're going on tour and we're going from gig to gig to gig. When they kind of removed the notion of the band, like the band construct kind of got played down. Mm-hmm. Was it ever articulated why they were on the road as much as they were? Like it just seemed like they were just like either in the most haunted neck of the woods possible, or they're just like constantly road tripping, right?
Well, I think that's the funny thing, because when you take the band element away, the constant driving that is the template of every episode in those 3 seasons, it makes no sense. So you almost need the band thing to make that make sense.
Yeah, like there are times in original Scooby-Doo episodes where they are clearly there to solve the mystery. Like somebody called them up on the phone and was like, hello, please come check this out. Mm-hmm. And some of them, they're like, let's go skiing. That sounds fun. And then the ski lodge happens to be haunted. So It's like, there is never a real reason. It's never concrete. Sorry, I don't have a strong foot to stand on to start out this thought, just because I don't know that much about it. And I didn't realize this until I was researching this. But like, the Scooby-Doo format and how it ultimately came out also was, it feels like, I don't know if it's too much to say that it kind of was ripping off other shows that had come out like a decade or so previously and were popular at the time. So like shows that I've never heard of. And one of them is The Many Loves of Dobie Gillith. I assume.
Oh, yeah. Cadieux. We don't have to say our ages on air. In my mind, Caitlin's about 10 years younger than me. I'm like 40. I imagine you're like 43, 44, 45. 40.
I am, I just turned 40, 45.
Okay.
I was born in 77. And,
all right, cool. So you and I are like
peak
roughly
Scooby-Doo time.
The same demographic.
We are the target audience.
But do you know what this what was the name of the show, Caitlin? I haven't.
The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis.
Wait,
or Gillis?
Wait, was it Dobie? Isn't that I'm gonna mess this up, but like wasn't that like a live action?
Yeah,
like, with like Gilligan as his hip cat best friend and
an American sitcom.
Yeah.
Starring Dwayne Hickman that are aired on CBS, et cetera, et cetera. And I believe that, so keen-eyed viewers may have noticed watching Scooby-Doo that there's a bit of like a beatnik energy there. You know?
Yeah.
Wild 60s time, flower power van, etc. I guess like Dobie Gillis, that was a wash in that influence, and like the attitude of the characters.
It's all exactly there. It's 1-to-1. Fred is like Dobie Gillis, and then Daphne is like the beauty, whatever her name is in the show, and Velma's the academic. And then
you know a lot about Dobie Gillis.
Well, I just watched I watched like a clip of it, and it's just like, oh, it's like in the way Flintstones is the Honeymooners. It just aligns directly with each character.
Well, and then the other show. Or no, sorry, go ahead. Add on the Dobie Gillis facts.
No, I just want to pile on Dobie. Like none of the creators were like tuning in on Saturday morning to be like, hey, wait a minute. At no point did anyone say, hey guys, my kids are watching this show and it just so happens to look a lot like Dobie. Like
this is our show. We did this. But I guess that's what you get and I know this is sometimes how pitches are done, where you're like, it's like such and such meets blah, 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 like two things. And the other show that goes into this like peanut butter jelly combination for Scooby-Doo is a show called, I think this is not a good name for a show, that's my opinion, I Love a Mystery.
But it's true.
Which is great. And you can tell instantly that this show probably has something to do with mysteries.
It's a radio serial.
It's an radio drama series about three friends. Yes, I am reading the Wikipedia page. Three friends who ran a detective agency and traveled the world in search of adventure. So you can see that they were like friends traveling worlds seeking stuff. Great. Perfect. We will not go into the details about why they're doing that, though.
But where do monsters come in? Like, I want to know, like, where the kind of supernatural or lack thereof, you know, like the kind of X-Files of it all. Like, where does that?
Oh, this was okay. Yes, I was like, of course, yeah. Just sorry to the listening audience who knows full well that I am just Wikipedia diving, but this was pointed out on Wikipedia, and I loved this, that that was taken from a book series called The Famous Five by Enid Blyton. I've never heard of it, and I don't know anything about it. Featured 4 youths and a dog. So basically Scooby-Doo, like wholesale conceptually, was cannibalized from a variety of other popular sources. And The Famous Five stories usually revolved around mysteries where they think it's a supernatural thing, and then it turns out that it's just like a villain in disguise. So they just were like, we also will do that. Honestly, I think it was so easy to get away with stuff like that back then. I almost wonder if that didn't happen so much more than we know. Because how would we know, really? A lot of people just being like, yoink this, yoink that. And now it's way easier to like track down that rings a bell. Like, I'm going to immediately go to the exact source and like see where you took that from.
Yeah.
But back then it was just like, kids like this, we'll do it. Yeah. A dog. There will be a dog character. Boom. They actually tried to, like, they were afraid to make Scooby a Great Dane at first because they were like, Marmaduke, it's too similar. Can't do that. And then Fred Silverman, who interfered a lot, I think, in the development process of this, was like, no, it's a Great Dane. Do it. Ship it.
We have these extra animation cells of Marmaduke, and we need to get rid of them before the end of the year. So
repurpose
it. Just do a little erase job.
All right, we've talked enough about Mr. Silverman. We've got Joe Ruby and Bill Spears, who were like the team they had worked on Space Ghost and Flintstones, and they were like heading this project as the writing team. So they can be to blame for just ripping off this stuff and like patching it together and creating something like probably very redundant. But
Fred Silverman, though, and I just, since you say we're moving on behind him, I just want to indicate that this is very funny to me that all the characters had different names in previous drafts, and he is the one who named Fred after himself, Fred Silverman.
I've got an idea.
I just think that's important to note. He was like, no, Jeff, I don't think so. That's lame. You know what? This strapping young lad should be called Fred.
All right. So Joe Ruby, Bill Spears, Clay, you can appreciate them. They're the writers of all this. But Caitlin and I will appreciate their lead designer because we like to draw. So we'll mention this fella now. Awo Takamoto probably saying that half wrong, half right. Okay, so this guy, if you go back through 40s Disney, he's like in the picture doing a lot of concept art. This was something I didn't know. I knew he had worked on like Flintstones. He's like part of the Jetsons. Like you can see Astro being like an earlier incarnation of what becomes like the Scooby design. He worked on Charlotte's Web. That's a classic. We'll talk about that someday.
Love
Caitlin,
that.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
More trauma.
Yeah. So this guy, he learned illustration from other inmates while he was at a California internment camp during the Japanese, Japanese American internment camp during World War II. So kind of intense, but built some great skills. So, good for him. I just thought I'd point that out because
not the typical story, honestly, that you hear where all the Disney people are like, I went to Cal Arts. Right. I know. Well, that's the thing. I feel like whenever we talk about, that era of Disney, like kind of like near the end, later side of the golden age, I mean, just war is just part of that story. And it's like, it's just tough to have to fit it in these conversations about cartooning. But I just wanted to put that out as a little bit of context. Okay. So, I mean, his character designs are great. I guess this is like the iconic Hanna-Barbera look. Clay, you picked up a pencil as a youth to write, the abstractions that we call words. Did you ever draw a cartoon?
I mean, I shouldn't have. I didn't, it definitely was not where my hand should have gone. I mean, like I never had the talent. I'm just going to come clean. Like I never had the drawing talent. Like I would go internal and kind of spin the yarn. But drawing was just, I couldn't do it. I couldn't. Oh,
I didn't want to put you on the spot that way. It was more that
click this link to see all of his drawings.
I think it's more like, cause Kaylin and I, we like to draw. We got good at it. But at this time, when I was young, all these characters were on every piece of merchandise, like in your home. So you were like looking at them a lot, and the line work is so clean and obvious. I would trace Hanna-Barbera characters all the time, is what I'm saying, to try to like live in their world. So that's more what I'm asking. Like, did you sit around and trace cartoon characters? Like, I feel like that's just a common kid thing, but maybe not. I don't know.
I mean, mine always came out like Shetland ponies. My Scooby was just like the body kind of like it like looked like that was all trunk and not enough Marmaduke. It was more Marma than Duke.
They're complicated. I will say that. Like, when I think of Hanna-Barbera, I think more. They never had like super, super simple designs, but like very angular.
Yeah. Yeah. Very graphical, flat.
Very like a little bit more of like the mid-century style that I love so much to talk on and on about. And like, I think it's like the big noses or like big jaws. Like Flintstones has that a lot. Like some of the other dog characters, like Scooby has that for sure. But Yogi. Yogi's like a very good example. They have those like big black noses. The human characters in this sometimes are like unnervingly realistic in comparison. So there's something about Scooby-Doo that stands out to me. I don't know if you feel the same way. And even the main characters, they're iconic. They don't have like whites of their eyes. Like nobody really does except for Scooby, I think, in this show. But sometimes like NPCs, what are they? The like supporting characters, or even like crowds of people are like very realistically rendered compared to them, like almost comic book style. Mm-hmm. And I was like, why is that? Like Scooby's very cartoonish. And then there's the people who are much more like human proportions, like they're wearing human clothes in the way that people do that.
And they look to be of a certain class, like there was like this odd, like everybody else looked like they were from the other side of the tracks. Like there was something kind of like to be said about like, oh, the caretaker of this place. And he'd just be this like scraggly, craggy, kind of like hunched kind of,
patchy suit.
I just wanted to say that the kind of embodiment of the other, like there'd be elderly people. Like there would be like they kind of like went out of their way to kind of like, the populace outside of the kind of main 4 or 5 characters were always like, there's like 1 or 2, and then they would end up being the bad guy. Like they would be the kind of culprit for. So, you know, it wasn't so much a whodunit with these fellas.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought of it. I mean, I think I always, when I overthink a cartoon like we have to do for this show, I always get down to this point where I'm like, you know, when the economics of the world play a role in the story, I feel like there's a believability that I really appreciate. Like I always use the point of The Incredibles because I'm like, their economic status doesn't seem to matter for their story. That's, for some reason, that bothers me. They're just like well-to-do. It's all fine. And, you know, but this show is a great case of like the motivations of the villains are usually economically driven. It's trying to like get an inheritance, like fix a thing, get some insurance money. Yeah. Like they're all they're kind of living in a world that our 5 main characters are not. Like, the villains are grounded, and then like our mystery van just sort of like whizzes through the universe.
They constantly are going to the malt shop also. It's like all they want to do is go to the malt shop and dance.
Yeah.
Which I don't remember this at all, but that's like that. This is what their whole world revolves around. I'm like, are they always going back to the same malt shop? Like that can't possibly be.
There was a fuel crisis, like there was a gas shortage. Like here they have this like expendable, disposable income. They're just like on the road, just like driving everywhere. Meanwhile, like everybody, like all the fun parks are closing down. The ski chalets are being kind of shuttered. like basically, it was this like income inequality between like the 5, you know, the crew, the Mystery Machine crew, and everywhere they went, like, hey, let's go to this fun place, guys. Oh, it's shutting down.
And a lot of mansions, like so many, because they're pretty much exclusively at like fancy resorts or museums or like somebody's old mansion, or we're in a castle. I'm like, where are you? How are you getting to all these places?
Well, that's where the band aspect would have come in. Like they probably would have been playing like a basement show. Kind of like,
I also don't remember. Maybe it's they were like, let's bring in the band aspect a little bit, sort of like after the fact, not narratively, but there are frequently musical interludes in this show later that are just like whole ass full songs with cute lyrics that are like very much in the style of the Beatles or something like that, where they're just like, and it's always during the chase scenes, the monster's like chasing him around and they're like, gonna take you to the malt shop, like do whatever. And I'm like, this is so bizarre. And I have no memory of this. And I was rewatching this show and it was in every episode I watched, there was a little like music time in the middle of it. And I was like, why is this not, was this like what Scooby-Doo is all about? I don't know.
Does it make you, do you kind of recontextualize your understanding of Scooby-Doo when you think of them as a band? Like, do you, like, if they're just a group of kids kind of wandering around like dip-a-doop, like here we are, like, oh, mystery to solve, versus like it's green room, or, you know, like they're like, they're just like going to the next gig. Like this is the life that they live. Like, do you think differently about them?
Here, I'll pitch you 2 like variations of this show that's band driven. We've got a Velvet Underground-esque band, like busting drug dealers in New York City. Or we have like Creedence Clearwater Revival investigating like Charles Manson-esque murders in LA. Both 1969 stories. It's funny that like...
Both with the dog.
Well, that's the funny thing here is like 1969 is such a like Nixon, like Vietnam, like turning point year, like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood-ish moment. But at the time, it wasn't. It was just like... We're still doing the 60s. And this show is such a product of its time, but in a weird way, it's like very dated for the era it's in. Like it's definitely being 60s through the 70s, which, you know, when you're a kid, you don't think about that stuff, but it's just kind of like, it's funny.
Yeah.
And it makes it timeless in a way that it kind of like solidified what the 60s kind of was for kids, maybe. And that's why the character outfits never change, because they're sort of bell bottom or like big orange sweater is just like a
But
timeless.
you can't. It's the brand.
thing.
Like it's their
Yeah.
the Mystery Machine is so iconic. Maybe like the most iconic image from this show. I feel like everybody knows what the Mystery Machine is, even if you can't rattle off exactly the outfits or anything. But it's like that is like a psychedelia. Like you can't divorce it from the era in which it was made. You can't really like it has to be a retro throwback vibe, or you've like fundamentally altered a major signifier of what Scooby-Doo is.
Yeah. I'm going to admit, I'm still trying to decide whether I want Velvet Underground or Credence for my Mystery Machine.
We can have both. It'll be like season 1, kind of True Detective style. Like there's the one, and then the next season just jumps.
Well, and if you
different
put both of them together, they can't sue you when you make it. So
it's a little bit like Lou Reed with Born on the Bayou. Like you get it with a little dog. You throw a dog on top.
there's got to be one dog and several teens.
Ever heard of Marmaduke? Kids love. I just want to say about Marmaduke, I feel I don't want to make fun of stuff on this show ever, but the drawing style of Marmaduke is one of the grossest
Wow, I love
things.
this.
Like the way Marmaduke
this
just
one's
sort of
getting
moves around
This is a
a
cartoon
room.
feeling. Like you can, it doesn't always have to be good.
Why is this dark? Clay was talking about childhood trauma earlier. I got talking about Marmaduke. I'm the dark one.
Marmaduke is a
You got
huge fan,
traumatized by Marmaduke.
Marmaduke is a listener. That's what's so sad about this.
Marmaduke
He's out
like
there
has
like,
no
oh.
bones. Like Marmaduke's body just sort of like moves around like the thing.
This is some trauma, Duke.
I kind of
This
feel
is
the
trauma.
same.
This is my trauma.
I feel the same way about Scooby-Doo, though. And I did like that I
okay,
read...
fair.
Hopefully it's okay that we're just all over the place with this, because that's where I'm taking it.
We're totally on some track. I think.
There's a track, question mark, that I'm laying down Scooby-Doo style, like one piece at a time. The design of Scooby-Doo was based on... Takamoto was like... Okay, I have to design a Great Dane character. I'm going to consult with this random coworker that also works here that happens to breed Great Danes, which I think is a very interesting fun fact. I've never once met a person that just casually breeds Great Danes on the side. But he got all these descriptions of fine quality, pedigree Great Danes look like. And he was like, okay, not doing that. I'm making him weird. I'm picking the wrong color. I'm giving him he's bow-legged. He basically made Scooby an ill-bred Great Dane intentionally. But I think that's great because it totally makes him more interesting. And he is a Great Dane, but you're not oh, he's a Great Dane. Marmaduke is just a Great Dane. He doesn't have kind of cartoonish qualities in my mind in the way that Scooby-Doo is he's just what he is. He is a cartoon dog and we know that, but that's not what a dog looks like.
But on a character perspective, what I love about both Scooby and Shaggy is that they introduce this notion of the kind of opposite of nobility. There's this kind of it's cowardliness, being short of the Cowardly Lion. I don't think there's a character for children that kind of positive, it's okay to be afraid, and you actually can go the other way, guys. You don't have to, you don't have to save the day. Just run.
True.
Just run,
You don't have to lie about being scared about what's going on.
No, I just think that was beautiful. For me, what the kind of foundation for watching Scooby-Doo as a child was that it kind of introduced you to the fear. It presented the fear. It allowed you kind of the opportunity to be afraid of it. And then it kind of popped the bubble by the end of the show. It kind of dispelled the fear in such a way. We talk about the kind of thinking at the time being we want to do away with violence and we want to kind of create a sanitized production. But in my mind, there was something so kind of contained about the emotional experience of this show, where I will go on record as saying I think some of the monsters that were designed for this show are truly terrified. They are truly seared into my head. We kind of riffed off of what is it, Captain Cutler, the deep sea diver ghost. That in of itself, you can hold on to the Mystery Machine as the kind of iconic Scooby-Doo image, but for me, the like glowing in the dark kind of ghastly plasma of the deep sea diver suit is just like, that will be what I hold on to till the day I die.
And shout out to like the voice acting of this era too. Like when we did the Haunted Mansion, we talked a lot about like the sounds of that and like 60s horror sounds that are kind of a little playful and like have a kind of a brassy fun to them. But the voice acting of a lot of these old rough voice guys, like you just don't hear this anymore. Even when a show plays it like kid friendly darkness, like you're talking about, you don't get these voices. And I think that's a big part of the iconography too, is like the sound of these villains.
Yeah. But then it allowed you to be afraid of them. And like Scooby and Shaggy, they were just like, you know, we're not going to go in that room. Like we're not going upstairs. And like, it was that kind of rational thinking of like, yeah, who in their right mind is going to go save the day? Like Velma, like that, like they could do that. But like, we're with, like, I think the kids are with Shaggy, right? Like we're hiding in the barrel or wherever, like, you know, we're back we're toking up in the van while everyone else is solving the mystery.
Well, that's actually part of the formula. And this is kind of like part of, you know, I'd be curious on your thoughts on this. You know, when you worked on Wendell and Wild, I wonder if this came up. So you have the format, the general idea of the Scooby-Doo show. These 5 characters originally, if you look at the first draft concept art that they did, it looks a lot darker and scarier. And all the characters are kind of exist in the same roles. Like they're all just trapped in the scenario. But the way they fix the formula to make it more kid-friendly is they push Scooby to the front. He's not a sidekick anymore. And they make him Shaggy's loyal friend. So you have the awkward, goofy pairing leading the show. You know they're always safe. So really, no matter how bad things get, you know that our leads are not going to be affected. And I think that's the trick that makes this be really scary, but also totally safe for kids. Like, I don't know, do you come up with that in a scenario like that? Have you tried to like remix character statures to try to, you know, make it work for like a younger audience while still being like dark? I'm just really curious about this idea, I guess.
I mean, speaking specifically to Wendell and Wild, what was interesting was, you know, the characters kind of started off in a very traditional place. And, you know, they were, I would argue that they felt familiar, that they were characters that you have either kind of seen or, you know, like the kind of, they were surface characters, but like in the drafting process and the kind of the mapping out of the story, we kind of dug a little bit deeper, and Henry and Jordan dug like very deep into like kind of challenging, like, well, why is this character who he is or who they are? Like it was, you know, and I think that's what Jordan really brought to the table, where he would kind of constantly question, like, why does it have to be that character? Like, why, you know, I've seen that character. Like, what is a character we haven't seen? And like, you know, you could see Henry kind of start to dial, like the kind of dial adjustment was basically taking something that felt familiar and comfortable and pushing it into territory that just felt new but real, like grounding the character in a kind of emotional honesty that felt kind of truthful to the story. And, you know, which is, I think, kind of the antithesis of Scooby, because Scooby is, you can drop in at any point in the season. Like you know, there's no character arc beyond what kind of happens in the moment. Like, is he going to get that Scooby snack? Probably. Is he, you know, like, are they going to solve the mystery? Yeah, probably. Like, is everything going to be okay? Totally.
Like, nobody's ever going to think about anything other than the mystery in Scooby-Doo either. Like, no one is thinking about, you know, interpersonal dynamics or their parents or anything.
So, Caitlin, is this a vibe show?
Oh, Scooby-Doo? For sure.
Because of that reason, because there's no character development.
Yeah, I almost find it unnerving to watch because of how tight the formula is. But from episode
it's almost
to episode,
horrific. It's like they're living the same day
spooky.
over and over.
And it's just like, it feels like a dream sometimes. I actually would say, I don't know if other people would describe Scooby-Doo as this, but I feel like it's a very dreamlike show. And I think it's because you can watch a bunch of episodes back to back, which I have done recently. And like the settings can be really different, or they can be very similar between episodes. Sometimes they are just like in completely different weird places. Sometimes they are like in the same swamp a bunch of times. And it's not, but you know, in your mind, you're like, wait, which mystery? Like, which mystery is this one? Who's which guy?
They never traveled beyond a 20-mile radius. They were just like constantly like...
It's on a loop, and the ghosts keep coming back, or like new ones move in. And sometimes they're like, go to Hawaii, or they're like somewhere in Asia. And we get to enjoy that for a while. Kiss
shows up on tour. And like,
yeah, it's like later the Globetrotters.
There's like little timestamps every once in a while. Like,
I just think it was a perfect show to build on with other franchise stuff too, because the first one was such a blank slate. Like the characters all had their very strong vibes that they have, but again, nothing beyond that. Nobody's going to be like. And then like Velma and I really had a breakthrough, and we like really talked over whatever was like getting under our skin. It's like, no, that came later. That came a lot later when people were doing stuff like that.
Which I'm curious, like, you know, I know that there's kind of like a ADBC-ness going on here. Like, I feel like we're very specifically focusing on Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Which in of itself is, that is the vibe where, you know, subsequent seasons, subsequent kind of iterations, like the films, like I know they all kind of play off of that basic premise of like, they're commenting on it. Like there's a kind of meta awareness of like, either they're consciously kind of breaking the formula of the original template, or, you know, or they're kind of forging into those character dynamics that weren't necessarily kind of present, but we all kind of wanted there to be, like, you know, what is the sexual orientation of these characters, and what is the kind
Fred
of
and Daphne, there's something going on there. We all know.
But like, as people who are entrenched in this world, like, do you want to create the vibe show where it's like, it just goes, like, it is The Simpsons. It just, you know, like you can kind of live in that world and like know that like this show will exist in its kind of hazy, kind of in perpetuity for multiple seasons, versus like, no, we're in and out. We're going to Breaking Bad this like 5 seasons max. Like, you know, like we know from the get-go that like, you know, Shaggy's going to break bad by the end of season 3.
Scooby dies at the end. Nobody is ready.
I was going to say there is a 2 seasons of Scooby-Doo that aren't as Breaking Bad as you're describing, but they do have a storyline. Have either of you watched any of Scooby-Doo Mystery Inc. from 2010 to 2012? Did you come across that?
No.
Here, let me just quickly paint that picture so you get a sense of what they tried, because it didn't last that long. So first of all, the characters kind of get this overarching storyline. They all have, it's all based in one town called Crystal Cove. They all have families, and they all have peers that engage with them episode to episode. So like, you know, you meet Daphne's parents, you see where she came from. And I can't remember what the overarching storyline is. It's kind of this cool dynamic. So as the teens are solving mysteries, as they do, they're also in school. So there's that kind of juggling of things. But with each mystery they solve, they take away some of the tourism nature of the town, because the town is reliant on these supernatural occurrences to drive tourism. So the like incompetent authority figures like the mayor and like the sheriff are mad when the kids solve a mystery, and that becomes like a tension as well. I don't know how this all ends up. I don't know if somebody's...
It's just amazing. It's funny. You're like, they have peers, they have family, they go to school, and like all of those things just don't exist in Where Are You? And it's just like, I honestly can't fathom what those stories are like, because it's just, they're in the van, they're driving to a place, that place is haunted, they solve a mystery, and they get back in the car. Like it's
they don't, how do they even know each other? Like, we don't know. We have no idea.
there's weird little projections of backstory. You know, it's like all these characters have middle names. Isn't Scooby's name like Scoober, Scooby Doo? I mean, like, what's it matter? Like, who cares? Because of these reasons. Like, it's interesting with cartooning. So, like, the iconic look of all these characters sort of prevents them from actually being real. They can't pass through time because they're always wearing the same outfit. So to try to say they live in a real town and have families and friends, I don't believe it because they're wearing the same damn clothes every day.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you don't really believe Bart Simpson will ever move on to another grade. And sometimes he's sad or whatnot, but not really. So you kind of break, like, you're trapped. It's always going to be that first version of Scooby-Doo, no matter how you add plot and like remix or like elevate it. It's always the same.
Yeah. I want the season where they're just like, they acknowledge that they're trapped in some time loop and they can't break out of.
Or maybe that's the mystery they have to solve and they can finally die.
They've just been doing it for decades. Kill me
like
now.
A Twilight Zone episode.
I think these are those probably early writer room conversations that lead to a weird season or two where they're like, you know what? How could we make more of like an interesting kids cartoon, but with the Scooby-Doo characters? It's like, oh, well, this supernatural Erie, Indiana type town, but we'll put the Scooby-Doo characters there. It's almost like just keep the cool mystery monster week format. Like that is just infinitely interesting to somebody of some age at any point, right? Like there's always somebody that wants just the Scooby-Doo vibe.
Yeah.
In their life.
It's definitely a vibe. Vibe confirmed.
I think I was a viber. Like I just wanted to vibe. Like no overarching season, character movements. Like just like I could tune in, turn on, drop out, and like that would be the experience, right?
Yeah.
But I'm trying to I don't know if any of you have a particular one. Like I watched this a bunch when I was a kid. And there's no like episode where I was like, that's the one I really loved. That was my favorite. It wasn't that. It was just like, I enjoy this show to watch.
There's certain villains.
That's not a criticism. It's just
out.
different. Like it's just a different thing.
Well, I feel like it's all driven by also 60s villain character designs it's like everything wants to get back there at some point. Like Batman, all of Batman's villains in this time, like the Adam West Batman of this time, like everybody is always recalling that. I feel like the Scooby-Doo villains are in that same category. The looks of so many of these characters you see in Gravity Falls, like other shows that are about like supernatural worlds, like that glowing aura, Clay, like you were saying, of like a Submariner type character with like, you just will still see this. They're just timeless looks. That antique scuba suit, it's just like a classic villain look at this point.
And it is scary. Like that is scary.
That is scary.
Is.
In that first season there was also a Pennywise, like a proto Pennywise character.
God.
Like there was like a killer clown and it would hypnotize you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like it was.
Oh my God. That's terrifying.
In the way they drew it, like it was just all kind of sharp, acute angles. Like it was not, they weren't the kind of rounded, like soft edges of a happy clown.
No.
But it was definitely like heavy metal clown.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, like that had to predate. I mean, I'm trying to think like I'm not going to be able to do a chronology here, but like Pennywise, it was like early 80s. Like
yeah.
Out, so like, what is I'm trying to think like, what were the precursors to Pennywise?
Right. Like was Scary Clown a thing?
Yeah. It's like, when did Scary Clown get invented? Yeah.
Yeah. Like I mean, if someone could make the argument that it was Scooby-Doo, I would believe it. I would totally believe it. Like that's like they're like 70, 71. Like it is a particular point, like post, why am I blanking on the live action Bozo the clown?
Oh, right.
Right. Like, who was the spooky clown back then? I think it was Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. This Ghost Clown episode is weird. I was watching this one. That villain is just driven by chaos. He doesn't really have an agenda. He's got that hypnotizing coin, like you said, but he just, he's a man that was fired from the circus, and now he's just returned to like create chaos, and that's it. So it's kind of like,
that is terrifying.
I think as a kid, when something's plotless or like has no bigger goal, that's scary. Like, you know, the like just watch the world burn version of the Joker is so enticing because that's a really terrifying idea to have that personality type, I think. And I think this clown is kind of a version of that. So he's just kind of unique in that way, I think.
Were all these villains, they were either motivated by greed or revenge, or like there was always something kind of so fundamentally kind of broken. Like there was like a moral kind of flaw that like, you know, as a kid, you're kind of like, I don't know if you're really kind of tuned into it, but like looking at it now, like these people are all like, there's a certain inherent sadness to them that like it's all tragedy. Like that killer clown he was fired, and like he like, you know, all he's doing is hypnotizing people to like get eaten by lions. And like, it's kind of amazing.
Right. So here's a stat. 27 villains that were captured in the first season of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? 23 of them committed their crimes to acquire money. So it is really like mostly just about the money. And then you got a couple chaotic characters. And then you've got like Charlie the Robot, who... Yeah. Do you remember that one where he just is sort of like running amok also, but he's also like programmed by a woman who's like the sister of the owner of the theme park or something?
Wow.
He's like always on the go. Charlie the Robot. He's just just going to the Tunnel of Love. Like, now I'm going to the Hall of Mirrors. Gotta go. So,
all right, here's a couple other ones. Let's see if we can like recall any. So the iconic first episode is the Black Knight, where he like comes to life in the full moon. So that's like kind of your haunted house trope of like the suit of armor. So some classic gothic horror there. We've got the Phantom Shadow, which is like that's the one where it's like the trick is there's two of them and they're like a big scary ghost guy. And that's like, they got some good maniacal laughter going. And the chain sounds. That's one of the sound ones. When I was looking at a list of like clips of some of these villains, like the sounds are so grimy, like just the recording tech of that time, like recording grinding chains and like playing it in a kids program. Like you wouldn't even use that in like a Rob Zombie movie now. It's just too dark. It's like so rusty. It's too real.
Yeah, it's
too
real
economically
sound.
driven.
Yeah, it's these chains.
Someone at some point was like, are these chains too much? And they're like, no, more chains, more cowbell. We need more, more chains.
You know, something that is charming about this kind of that, it's like there was a meta to this even in this early era, because you have some of the villains doing like movie special effects to create the illusion. Like Redbeard, like the pirate guy, he has dry ice on hand. He's like, I'm doing kind of a Pirates of the Caribbean type. They're like artists, like they're doing some Imagineering actually at some point.
Yeah, I watched one that I'll just throw in here too that I do like. I love all the monster designs. Like they're just so classic. I don't know. This one I really liked. He's like he's like in a wax museum, and he's basically just a guy covered in wax out of the wax machine in the basement. And he looks great. Like it's a great design, but he was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to play up on the fact that there's a rumor that this place is haunted by the wax museum phantom. So I'm going to like just douse myself in wax and become the demon. And I love that.
That's commitment. that is basically like, you know, I might get burned.
I'm sure it's not safe.
So, anybody else? I have a couple other like big ideas I want to talk about. Anybody have any more like classic villains you want to talk about, or an episode that pops into your mind?
I feel like the only addendum I'll throw is like a lot of the ghouls kind of felt Boris Karloffy. Like there was a certain kind of like, I don't even know if I can kind of pull up what episodes they were in, but there was a certain kind of lumbering quality that felt, I look at them and like it felt like Boris Karloff to me. Take that for what it's worth.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. Like there's like a passion for like old classic horror, like Universal, like in that like Stephen King way. It's like, here's all the weird shit I remember as a kid funneled like through this one like Pennywise entity. It's like this show can just be a space to, for a half hour, play with like the idea of like a type of monster or like a supernatural figure, like a headless guy. I don't know. Who wouldn't want to tell a story about like just a headless guy who's just running amok?
I know I do.
I know. You always talk about it.
They also had a character who was not per se the bad guy, I don't think, but he's like definitely just like Peter Lorre. Like he's like that like Igor, like big like eyes guy, like talks in this very creepy way. He's in the ski lodge episode, I think, too. And it's just like they were being very tongue-in-cheek referential with that kind of stuff, I think, which is nice.
What about Space Kook? Do you guys remember Space Kook? The like,
wow, let me just Google that.
He was like this like astronaut. He was like an alien.
Oh my god,
with a skull.
He's cool. Wow, this is really, yeah, he's like a blue spacesuit with like a red filled helmet with a floating skull inside.
Man, that is awesome. Yeah, I remember this guy. What about Space Kook? That's a phrase that's very funny for some reason.
Don't forget Space Kook.
Glowing footprints dipped in phosphorus. Good Lord.
Color palettes of this time, like the purple of these skies, that is like an emotional resonance for me, like things that stick with me. Like the pairing of that with the green. Like I think, you know, He-Man, Filmation, a lot of cartoons like steal this sort of like color language, color story stuff from Scooby-Doo. Like the use of green is like kind of a villainous, like supernatural energy. I feel like, I'm sure it probably goes back further, but to me, cartoon wise, it's like the projection of like whatever those cells were and the light coming through them and the way the film interacted with it. That green is just like iconic. And that even the red, like pulling up this spacey, what about Space Kook fella? Like the way that red is vibrant. It's like that same Rats of Nim red. That's just like so intense in your mind.
Yeah, and having him be blue with the red contrasting, like it's just so nice. It's so cartoonish and like almost superhero-y, but it looks really good.
Yeah.
Love it.
Shout out to Space Kook.
What about
Real
him?
one.
What about Space Kook?
Yeah, what about him?
I want to hop back to some of the, I guess our protagonists, like our collective, our five, because, like they're all very specific roles and it like they don't really get remixed. That's the thing. Cause I was trying to think of other, shows that sort of embody this like set of characters dropped into scenarios like Seinfeld. You have your four friends, you put them in a scenario. They all have their personalities so locked in. You're going to get something because the writers know these characters so well. It's like the Scooby-Doo stuff it's pretty similar. I'm trying to think of another show besides Seinfeld that feels like that. I mean, I guess Friends is that.
I think really just like it's the sitcom vibe. And it's the sitcom inspirations, like the sitcom that they generously stole from to make this show. Like it's just the same kind of thing where a lot of sitcom characters, like, you know, the next episode, everything is just going to be reset. And it's like the last episode never happened.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that.
And then they drop a baby into the mix and then.
Yeah. And then there's Scrappy Doo.
Well, that's the honeymooners. That's the, I mean, like, even like, I mean, yeah, the sitcom, like the Family Ties, the Cheers, the like, you never want these people to grow. You never want them to have any kind of character development.
Move on now.
I mean, I do feel like it's a kind of syndicated mindset where you're just like the sheer kind of number of episodes where you want them to play in perpetuity, where you don't have to think of like, well, what happened last week or the week before, because you just want to drop in at any, you want to be a parachute audience member.
I feel like we're getting closer to what a vibe movie or show is. And I would say that it is that. It's like it doesn't, I'm a strong proponent for vibe media, but it's like media that lacks a significant emotional peak at any point. I think that helps it because you're not like, oh my God, like here's the part where so-and-so like gets in a huge fight and like, now I'm gonna feel bad for a minute. Like it doesn't have that. It's like, I want to hang out with these characters and I know where to find them. kind of a thing.
They can't, it's like they can't, you know, like Frodo journeys too far from home to have him be a sitcom character. Like if you go too far and you change too much and come back and your point of view is different, you broke the template.
Yeah, like that's not a
just
vibe.
One story. No,
that's like
no
you're
vibe.
really in it.
Yeah,
you're harshing my vibe with your character development.
You cannot vibe at Mount Doom. It's just not how it works.
I don't recognize you anymore. Where did you go? You left the Shire, and now you're like a totally different person.
All the hobbits that we don't get to hang out with who have been in the Shire the whole time, like that's their real reaction when they get back. They're like, weird, dude. Weird,
Always talking about your friend Aragon. Like, am I going to meet him sometime? No.
Oh, yeah, right, sure. You got a friend at summer camp. Like, yeah, right, we get it.
Yeah, you're friends with the king. Cool.
All right, let's kind of rate not rate, I don't know. This isn't a rating show, but I want to talk about like the archetypes that are our human characters here in the roles they play, and like what are they good? Do they suck? Like, could we lose it? I don't know. So Fred, the leader. Iconic, I guess. I didn't want to be Fred. I don't feel like he's like you want to be him, but you need like this kind of like tent pole in the center. So he, format wise, like he starts the investigation. Like he's usually like the inciting character, right? And he sets the trap. So Fred, feelings like young emotional feelings about Fred, were either of you drawn to him as like
never
a character?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just never interested in him. He always walked in the front door with that like ascot chest kind of pumped up.
Yeah,
like,
he's
he was
ridiculous.
Just like hey, let's go in here. Like it like never wanted to be him. Never.
Yeah. I think he's the adult. Like he's the adult in the group, and so I'm like boring. Like I don't really. And it's you actually kind of need him because he's the one that solves it at the end. But he's the one who is always like, no, it's not that. Whatever. He was too like realistic and grounded, and I'm like, I'm more interested in speculating on if there's actually a ghost here or not.
I think it's privilege. Like he was like the most.
He bought the van.
He was just the most privileged of them all. Like I you know, the pairing of him and who we talk about next. Like I feel like I couldn't vibe on them because they just felt like of a different kind of social cast that like I was not personally a part of and didn't feel connected to.
Yeah, he's got the confidence of a rich kid, and his mind is organized in a way, like the way he's able to kind of restate. He's usually the one describing at the end, like, here's how all the clues lined up and why here, and this is why, and now we know the end. See you next time.
Yeah, because he's the dad.
Totally nice guy though. Like he's like a sweet, like he's polite, but you get like young Republican vibe. You get like
absolutely
like
sorry, Fred.
But like barbecue dad vibe.
Oh yeah, totally.
Well, it's like the ascot says so much. Whomst among us is rocking an ascot thusly? Not I.
And
not
we know
me, not people I know.
He's also a character from a Bruce Springsteen song. He's like these were the best days of my life. I think like he's not going anywhere. Like he's keeping he's bringing in new teens later as these guys age out.
Oh, I hate to hear that. I don't like to hear that at all.
Is that story that's too much of a character arc for you?
That's really real in an uncomfortable way.
All right,
it's probably accurate.
We'll move on to Daphne. Maybe like the least important. I don't know. So like the beautiful character, I guess, right? Like she's playing the tambourine if this was a band. She's danger prone. She's the one that kind of like the danger is drawn to her, but damsel in distress. But also if you really look at the story, she does pull up a lot of clues, but they're usually through like her fumbling. There's a lot of like coincidence, you know, in this whole format. And she's a character that's constantly just like coming upon a thing without trying.
She's the bankroller. She like subsidizes she flips for gas. And she's always, I was always kind of frustrated because you did feel like, you know, the two of them would always pair up. Like they were always the kind of alpha couple. Like they struck me as the kind of like, I don't know, football player or cheerleader. Like, you know, it just didn't feel like me. It didn't feel like Like they're going to go off, make out behind the van and do their thing. And just, if you needed to borrow $20, you ask Daph.
I kind of agree. I always wanted to like Daphne because I really like her design. And I think that's just because any character that like, I think I secretly always wanted to have red hair. And like, so any red haired like character in fiction, I was like, cool by default. But then there was like nothing else to grab onto, which is not ideal.
Yeah.
For me, to be honest, it's like, I just really don't remember what she does ever. And so even having watched it recently, I'm like, what does she do? She's just always kind of there. I don't know. And then, yeah, it's like, it seems like she's there to get harassed and like frightened. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I guess a show like this, that's kind of like a sitcom, like needs a reactionary character in this mold. That's sort of like this, not that she's the scaredest, but she like has a certain type of scare that she responds to. And I guess that just sort of like makes the villains cooler and the mystery maybe like more fun. And then that's kind of it. All right. Sorry, Daphne, you look cool. She's got great eye makeup.
Pink tights with a green scarf. Like, I love it.
Please. All right, Velma, your academic character, I guess, like the brains of the group. She is usually the one kind of taking this jumble of clues that are flying into the story and kind of piecing it together in an annoying way, usually, I find.
I'm going to come clean and admit I had a crush.
Yeah, sure. Of course.
I think that she may have been the kind of the beginnings of crushes like that. Like she could have been a first for me.
Yeah.
She was intellectually challenging. She wanted to kind of like explore. There was something about her that was not, I'm totally projecting, but like she was like
she was beautiful and elegant and ethereal.
She was an angel. No, but she was always like, let's look at this. Let's explore. Yeah. Let's discuss. Let's analyze. Like there was something like she challenged the status quo in a way that like, I just thought that she was so cool. Like I had a crush.
Velma, if you're listening,
you can reach Clay at, trying to think of your email address off the top of my head.
ScoobyDooFan@gmail.com.
Wow, you scored that first. No number at the end? Amazing.
Scooby-Doo 1977. You
said it for years. I remember, I think, being kind of annoyed that she would lose her glasses a lot, and that would be like a repetitive joke. I don't know why.
You know where that comes from? Did you come across the thing? So the voice actor during a recording session or something
lost her glasses
early on. Yeah, she like literally said, "My glasses, I can't see without them." And then I don't know, the men in the room laughed or something. They're like, "Okay, hey, wow, you'll do that every time." And she's like, "Oh shit!" And then
I actually love that. So it's changed my perspective. But I like that too because like I'm not a sciencey person per se. So I can't necessarily be like, oh, like I relate in like a direct way. But I always liked that she actually like gave a shit. Like that was the thing with Fred, like with Daphne. It's like they weren't like actively interested in the way that I maybe wanted them to be. Like Shaggy and Scooby are just fun to watch. They're experiencing the mystery, even if they're not like putting it together. And Velma was like, well, wait a minute, what about that? And she was also like, she was like taking it seriously. Like that was nice. Where Fred, I feel like, was the one who was like, it's nothing. Like Scooby would be actively haunted by something and freaking out and tell him. Like they'd go be like, oh, something crazy's happening. And Fred would be like, it's fine. Like you ate too many sandwiches or whatever. And it was just like not that attentive to it.
But wasn't that the kind of macro, that was the character dynamic between the five of them, where it would be Daphne and Fred would just be like, we can walk in the room and we'll be the center of attention. Like we could go anywhere and like, we'll be fine. And, you know, Shaggy and Scooby would be like, are you guys insane? This is asinine. Like we have to get the hell out of here.
We are going to die.
Velma would be like somewhere in the middle where she'd just be like, actually, I think this is the product of a traumatized childhood who like lost his like she would kind of like go through the kind of like intellectual discourse of what the underlying mystery would be, and whether she would solve it or not, she would always be kind of, like intellectually curious that, in ways that nobody else was.
Never forget you, Velma.
Clay, I'm going to bum you out just a little bit. Now, in the Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated show I was talking about later, they do something really weird with Velma. It's almost worth looking up just to see. They make her like really unlikable to the point where at times she's the antagonist of the story and like teams up with the villain to do something against the main team, which seems like the last, if there's one thing you don't do, you don't have a team member betray the Scooby-Doo team. It's really weird. And the character is a little gloomier. I don't know why they went this way. But that's her role in that show. Like usually she's like the version we're describing, but it leans towards dour and like rude and dismissive of the rest of the group. Which is like a weird thing, but
it kills me. It really does. And like, I cannot abide by post 1978 Scooby-Doo. Like I just like it. Yeah. It just crosses the line. Like I know that they've advanced these characters. Like I know there's a new, what is it, Daphne? Like there's a new Velma and like they're still like creating like shows, and like I think it's kind of marvelous that there's still more room to kind of explore and more terrain to cover. But like for me, like I just can't go beyond those first 3 seasons, because it was all vibes, and like you could project on them and say like, oh, I bet you Velma is a freak. You could push it in different places, but the show never went there. And it's, I think like every subsequent season has been like a projection of the showrunners and the writers and the creators, like kind of pushing the characters in places that like, I mean, I'm not against it, but it's not what I come to when I think of like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, you'll take that enrichment elsewhere. Like Scooby-Doo let's let it be.
You got to write your own.
I know.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
new project.
My fanfic. Oh, I have my fanfic. Believe me, like.
I did. I was going to ask earlier when we were talking about tracing the characters, and I was like, "But did you write stories?"
He's opening a drawer and pulling out a stack of spiral-bound notebooks.
The erotic adventures of the mystery machine.
Scooby-Doo, how are you?
Oh, God.
And do you come here often?
I mean,
with an actual question mark?
Question mark, yeah.
All right, we've got our friend Shaggy. I guess Shaggy is like, yeah, I guess I'm Shaggy as the viewer. You're like, I'm kind of awkward.
Yeah.
And my shirt doesn't fit that well.
Yeah, what is it about Shaggy? I found Shaggy compelling, I guess. I don't know. I think there was more like, if we're talking about class, I feel like I was like, yeah, Shaggy and I are probably in the same class. He's just like, I don't know. I want to go to the malt shop. I don't want to be here right now. Like, I make silly jokes, and I have a dog, and I'm best friends with my dog. I was like, yeah, this is nice. I'm cool with this.
He was the bassist.
Oh, absolutely.
Just like, true. Yeah. There has to be some animation cell somewhere where they are a band.
A band.
Like,
yeah, there's got to be that art. Yeah.
Velma's on keys, Scoob's on drums. You know, like Daphne's got the tambo. Like they're just all like, of course, Fred's the guitarist. Like, of course, like it's just like, you know, but like
lead singer, frontman.
I was picturing it more of as like a Henry Rollins also.
Oh my God.
Just kind of like
wrapping the mic cord around like because I've got an ascot. Yeah.
It's like, I don't know if you could really cut loose in that ascot and tight fitting shirt. I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, that'll be like.
There is that sweaty basement show that they do, and like Fred takes off his shirt and just keeps the ascot on. Like it's just like
ascot. That I can see clearly.
Oh my God. All tatted up.
The truth is, I think all these ideas we're speculating have happened over the years because there's 10 seasons or whatever. Because I'm flashing back now and I'm picturing seeing clips of like a goth band that was like friends with the Scooby Gang in one of like the late 90s versions when it's very like Batman the Animated Series era or something where everything's a little more noir and angular and there's like a moody band or something.
Yeah.
So I think all this stuff is just, it's there for us and we don't care.
I won't have it.
In our world, there is nothing beyond 1978. And like, this is like, we've existed in this kind of bubble where everything stays the same. They wear the same clothes and they just solve mysteries.
Yeah. And they're our friends. And okay, here's an idea. Now you pair Scooby with Shaggy and it's like, while they're kind of oblivious to begin with, they both become like the most invested in the story. And I always think of this with kind of mystery, supernatural driven stories. It's the characters that believe it the most that solve the scenario. And while these guys, they usually do like a Rube Goldberg type of like, whoops, oh, we knocked the bad guy down and now we beat him. But it's because they are so emotionally engaged in what's going on, they save the day. Is that a theme in this show or is that just like, I don't know. Do you, either of you like see that as like part of the writing or is that just like the bit at the end and it's just funny? But is there anything being said with the show at all? Like, is this about storytelling? I don't know. Is it? I can't think of a world where I would be on a creative team, make a bunch of things and it's 100% just the same thing over and over. Like, do you think any of these people, our friends, Fred Silverman, Joe Ruby, Bill Spears, were they trying to say anything with the show or what?
I don't know.
I'm just going to say no. I don't think they were saying, like...
Braver than me.
I mean, I think they knew whether they said they wanted to go to the vibes or not. Like, I do, like, Monster of the Week. Like, it's like, you come to us, like you want your hamburger, you want your fries, you want them to taste a very specific way. It's when they veer outside of the kind of taste palette that you as the audience start to kind of like say, whoa, that's not my Scooby. That's like, it's got to taste a very specific way. And in no other kind of form would I ever advocate for this. Like, I don't advocate for this in my own work. Like, you want growth, you want development, you want an emotional arc, but there is something to be said about the comfort food of an episode that just, it is, I mean, Shaggy and Scoob, like they were the voice of reason. I think they were the closest thing to an audience proxy because they had our fears. Like they were scared and we kind of were too, as one should be when you see spooky robot astronaut
killer clown.
Like, like it just, and that they would kind of stumble through and kind of, find the clue or solve the mystery. Like it was always, I don't know, that I feel like that kind of relief at the end was such a, I don't know, like they earned it. And it just kind of like, that's just like that last little pickle for your hamburger.
But yeah, they were always so happy about it too. I feel like there wasn't really an episode that ended and they were like, oh my God, like I am traumatized. And now I have to, like they would go to the mall shop and they would dance together or whatever. Like they'd crack a joke. Like in the Wax Museum one, Shaggy and Scooby are driving away. They're all driving away in the mystery van and they have like wax dummies in the back made of Shaggy and Scooby that they're like so pleased to have. It's really funny. It's cute. And it's just like that little thing where it's like, we did a great job. Like on to the next one, gang.
Yeah. But what have we learned, guys? What lesson are we taking away from this experience?
Fuck all. Absolutely nothing.
My lesson is always stop like looking for something that's not there. Cause that's, I think I'm just like, I like Scooby-Doo and I like the vibe, but it boggles my mind that, I guess it's a job and it's a format and like people valued the system they were in. Like can you do this today? Like, can there be a Scooby-Doo anymore in this way? That's something that plays by a template so closely? Or are people just, we've seen it, like, can there only really be one Scooby-Doo? Like, is this something that's so iconic? You can't really have something that has this kind of template, this 3-act, like, reveal of the monster, like a clue that it is actually maybe a real person. Let's investigate. Then a bumbling conclusion that reveals, and then they reiterate the story in 20 minutes to the end. Can you do it anymore?
I mean, Law and Order, like I don't think, like, you know, like in terms of like an actual animated half-hour show, I don't think so. Like it probably, like we've evolved beyond this as audience members, but like the procedural, like the X-Files Monsters of the Week, the show that basically you come to it because of the formula. The formula is so, it fits so snugly around your bum. Like you just want those pants on. Like you want to put
those old Wranglers.
Yeah, like they just feel so cozy because you slip them on and you just, like,
you're home. That's
the feeling, you know. You know, whether who's making those shows, are they making those shows? Like, I doubt it.
Yeah, I don't think you can make stuff like this anymore. Because, like, Law and Order is a great example. I don't think I would have thought of on my own, but I feel like that has a lot of loyalty and following from people who've been watching it for a long time. And it actually made me think of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which was obviously like in the 90s. And like I watched when I was pretty young. But I remember that they like made a big joke out of that. It started off as like a very Monster of the Week show, or maybe like the first season or two were like a lot of like one-off episodes of just like random monster stuff happening. And then they called themselves the Scooby Gang, like very tongue in cheek, like, oh, we're solving these mysteries, whatever. And then it sort of naturally started to evolve into what I think like a lot of modern television is now, where we don't do that. It's not a vibe show. It's like, we're telling you a story and it might take us 1,000 years to get there, but everything's very dramatic and heightened and like arcs and character changing and like blah, blah, blah. And I think like a lot of it is just because, you know, like audiences were just getting a little more sophisticated, but also nobody just like turns on the TV and like watches what's on there. And like nobody has a routine of like,
that's true.
Oh, it's like such and such afternoon, you know, I'm going to put on the TV and like hang out, which I think is kind of sad, I guess. But like everything is, you just like seek out everything on your own. And I think people are trying to make more stuff to be like, oh, really like fall in love with like my thing, like my special thing. Because you're not just going to like routinely visit it.
Yeah. I mean, I think you make a great point. Like in the era of streamers, like there's no vibe anymore. Like it's like you're there to binge, like to watch 3 episodes of, or however many episodes of Scooby-Doo back to back. Like it washes over you in a way where it's like, oh my God, have I been watching this for 5 hours now? Like it just feels like there's no beginning, middle, and end. It's just a plateau of vibes. And I think when you're a kid, like tuning in after school, you know, there was something to be said about like, you know, this is my half hour with Scooby, and you know that'll carry me over till tomorrow when I tune in after I come back from school the next day. But like to binge it, to like, you know, in this era of like, we're just going to watch 1 episode, 2 episodes, 3 episodes, like we're just going to cram them in. There's something kind of like, yeah, the kind of flatness of it is, it doesn't kind of merit kind of more than 1 episode at a time. Like you have to dole that shit out, or otherwise it just becomes the repetition of it all. Like you can't feel it.
Scooby is like anti-bingeable. You can't really binge it, or you start to disconnect. Like that's definitely what was happening with me watching it. And now, like, I feel like this is an insane comparison. I don't know if either of you have watched The White Lotus on HBO, but it's a mystery show because like literally the first thing you find out in both seasons is like, oh, somebody died. And like now you're going to watch the season like trying to figure out who that is. But it's so like everything's really tense and dramatic and super awkward and cliffhanger. And whoa, this thing happened. Oh my God, could it be them? And then so you're like, you you just want to binge it so bad. And then it's over. And then you're like, dang, I wish I had a new one to watch, but I don't.
Yeah.
So you just move on. But it's like, that's how all TV is now, I feel. That's painting with a really broad brush. I don't know. But a lot of it is like, there's cliffhangers at the end of every episode because you're just going to go watch the next one. And that's what it's set up to do.
Where with Scooby, we would be having a party, a Saturday night party, and you could just put the projector on and like screen, like episode after episode of Scooby-Doo, and people would just be like, "Oh, cool!" Like it like you just want to. You don't even need to watch it. Like like it's just something in the background. Like it's a mood more than it is an experience. Like you have to kind of like just go with it.
Well, I'm sort of regretting the ghost clown tattoo I got for my favorite Scooby-Doo villain, but I feel like in a way, like maybe it makes me more fun to.
You got to cover it up with Space Kook.
But like, I feel like if you were of a particular age and you watch this show and you watch these particular monsters, like they're still with you. Like that, like, the deep sea diver is still with me. Like the opening credits are still with me. Like you mentioned the rusty chains. Mm-hmm. Like I want to talk about the bats, like the sound effects of like the bats and the thunder. Like something about the opening intro just felt really like it's just seared into my mind. And I do think that when you were of that particular generation, it was safe horror. It was gateway horror. It kind of within the kind of rotation of a singular episode, you would have the fear, the kind of like the terror, but then they would pull the mask off and it would just be, it dispels, it like takes the air out of the tire and you're okay. And you can kind of walk away from it feeling like you've had a contained traumatic experience that feels safe.
All right, that's all for now. Clay, thanks for joining us. Why don't you tell the people where they can find you and what you've got going on?
Yeah, well, I'm on Twitter as long as there's still a Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I just came out with a novel called Ghost Eaters, which if you're looking for something spooky to read, that would be great. Keeping it within the realm of comics. I have I wrote a story for the upcoming issue of Creepshow on Skybound, which will be January 23rd. And you mentioned Quiet Part Loud. So yeah, if you're looking for a podcast, that's a fun one.
The scares abound. The monsters will stick with you. And for Cartoon Feelings, you can find our episode archive and other facts about us at cartoonfeelings.com. You can tweet at us or join us on Instagram. Both of those are at Feeling Cartoons. And we just got to say a special thanks to our dear producer, Josh Romeo. Thanks, Josh.
And then the camera pans over to me and it's Josh. And I take off the mask.
Oh, my God.
And actually it's me underneath. Yeah, and I would have gotten away with it if you hadn't taken the time to rate us on Apple Podcasts and leave us a review and share us with your meddling friends. Thank you. And consider... I was going to make like an embezzlement joke. Don't embezzle our Patreon, but feel free to visit it and check it out and consider tossing us a couple of your well-earned dollars to support the show. We'd really appreciate it, and we would give you access to really cool, good, fun, and bonus content. It's bonus content. You decide if you think it's cool. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.